Good afternoon, everyone. Naha, ni'i nahaban e ta siniki. Welcome to the Native Wellness Institute's Native Wellness Power Hour. My name is Jillene Joseph, and I am a Ani from Fort Belknap, Montana, and I currently live in Oregon with my family. And we live in between the Columbia and the Sandy and the Clackamas Rivers on the traditional homelands of many nations that made this land their home. And I'm happy to be with you today, and I'm super happy that you have welcomed me into your home as well. So welcome. This is our Power Hour in week 5. I can't believe we're already on week 5. So we started out on Saturday with Movement as Medicine with Rulan Tangen from Dancing Earth. Yesterday we had songs from prayer songs from many nations across the country. And today our topic is on the power of letting go, part 2. So I was supposed to do my part 2 last Monday and we had technical difficulties. So this is my part 2. So I'm going to do a quick review and then go a little bit deeper into the power of letting go. So again, I want to welcome you all to the Native Wellness Power Hour. This is our response to the pandemic and it's our contribution. And so we offer programming 7 days a week, and the programming includes storytelling, songs, workshops, comedy, poetry, storytelling, just all kinds of things to bring wellness and healing to you in your home. So I'm super honored to be here, and I'm super proud of the work that the Native Wellness Institute has been doing. So like many of us, we changed our work on a dime and came up with this idea of the Native Wellness Power Hours, and here we are already in week 5. So again, welcome. We also want to, I want to give thanks to the National Indian Child Welfare Association. They're one of our partners and collaborators in this effort, as well as the Noise Foundation. And we're madly writing grants to other places to look for funding to continue bringing these free resources to you. So really the intent behind these sessions are to just bring some positivity, to bring some tools, to bring some uplifting messaging to you as we all are in our quarantines and staying at home and practicing physical distancing. So today's intentions are really to talk about how trauma impacts us and our families and our communities and our nations, and then more importantly, like what we can do about that. That's what today's lesson is about. And my vision always is I want every Indigenous person to learn about trauma. And because when we talk about trauma, we have to talk about healing. That's why I love to talk about trauma, because you also have to talk about healing. Because where there has been trauma, healing is the answer. So I love talking about trauma. And I love also like being an example of how we don't have to allow trauma to hold us hostage. And in this work, I've been doing this work for like 35 years now, since I was 19 and I'm 54 now. I've seen where like trauma holds a lot of people hostage, and we give away our own power to trauma, and we allow it to keep us paralyzed and to keep us stuck. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then before I get going with the review, I also want to give a big birthday shout out to one of my mentors and role models and one of our founding board members of the Native Wellness Institute, Theda Newbreast. So hey Theda, happy birthday. So okay, so we're going to jump right in. I had this little flip chart presentation for my first part, the Power of Letting Go, part 1. And so I'm just going to review a few things really quickly before we dive into more. And last time I used this willow stick. It was a double ball stick for my pointer. And someone complained and said they didn't like my pointer stick. And they were going to send me a new one. So now I pulled out a drumstick, and my drumstick will be my pointer. So just bear with me here. So what this first page represents is, if you could imagine this circle representing like the world that our ancestors lived in, and that big crack in the middle represents like when colonization first started. So kind of like the things that broke our ancestors' world apart. That's what the circle represents, our ancestors' world. The crack is like represents what happened that broke their world apart. And the words in the dark purple are some of those things that happened that broke the world of our ancestors apart. So we have loss of life, loss of land, loss of way of life, forced religion, massacres, forced relocation, broken treaties, genocide, disease, alcohol, boarding schools as examples. Now also in the light purple, and hopefully that shows up, we have some of like the contemporary trauma, so some of the lasting trauma, like examples of trauma that still happen today. So the dark purple are examples of the historical trauma, right? Things that have happened in the past. And then the light purple words are like the contemporary or the current day trauma that still happens today. Gossip, as an example, and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, poverty, neglect, rage, foster care, chronic negativity, chaos and drama, and many others, abuse, violence, foster care, etc., etc. So on the outside circle, in the pink, these are the things that keep our world together and like keep us still here. And so we have lots of words: determination, ceremony, gatherings, even though we have to have virtual gatherings today. Like now we're all virtually gathered from, from all over the place, okay? Prayers, love, song, dance, traditional foods, etc., etc. Humor, that's always a good one. So these are the things, these are examples of what we might call historical wisdom. So those are the things that keep us here and why we're all here. And I always pause and reflect and think about like everything that our ancestors experienced, and yet we're still here. We're a product of our ancestors, right? So really what we are is we are descendants of miracle survivors of genocide. And I always just like, let's just pause and take that in for a minute. It's just like, wow, I descend from miracle survivors of genocide. That's pretty awesome. Okay, so this is still review. This is all the stuff I talked about last time, but it's important to like have this foundation before we move on to other stuff. So this drawing here was my interpretation of understanding intergenerational trauma. So we just talked about historical trauma and how that contributes to contemporary or everyday trauma today. And this is my interpretation of intergenerational trauma. So it's where one generation experiences trauma, and that's what all those, these lines around here represents. And then when that goes unchecked or unhealed, then it changes our behaviors. It changes the way we think, which then changes the way we behave. And when those traumas go unhealed, then unknowingly we pass those on to the next generation. Okay? And then this generation not only takes the trauma of the former generation, but then we experience our own generation in this generation, our generation as well. And if this goes unchecked or unhealed, then unbeknownst to us, then we pass it to the next generation. And they pick up our trauma and the trauma of the generation before, and they pick up their own trauma from their generation. So again, this is my interpretation of intergenerational trauma. So our trauma then can become like the gift, that's in quotations, the gift that keeps on giving. So examples of that are like the foster care system. So many of our children are in foster care. And many of my friends who are like, that do this kind of work, they are now seeing the grandchildren of some of their first clients, okay? That's an example of intergenerational trauma. All the reasons why the children were taken from the homes, those reasons, whether it's addictions and violence and poverty and things like that, they keep being passed down and passed down and passed down, okay? Does that make sense? So intergenerational trauma. Okay. So then, again, this is still all a review from last time. So when we hold on to trauma, then it can contribute to us feeling all different kinds of ways, okay? And some of the key words that many of us feel when we have unresolved trauma are things like fear. We don't feel worthy. We may feel resentment. We may have grief and unresolved grief. And many people doing this kind of work, talk about we're a people that have 500 plus years of unresolved grief, right? We might feel disgust. We might feel guilt, sadness, shame. That's a big one. We might feel anger or rage. We might feel abandonment. So these are some of the stuff that we hold on to, okay, that we hold on to. And now what's happening, like with this pandemic that's going on, what's happening is the people that are already traumatized were being re-traumatized with this pandemic. And lots of feelings are coming up, like fear, like grief. Okay, so we're grieving all kinds of things during this pandemic. We might be grieving a loss of a loved one that has died of this virus. We might be grieving the loss of our everyday work schedules, right? We might be grieving the loss of our jobs or loss of our income, grieving the loss of, gathering as family or friends. And the list goes on, all the ways that we're grieving. So and we might be feeling all these things all at once, right? And that's only normal, and it's okay to be feeling this way. And sometimes we just have to acknowledge that, right? And acknowledge like how the pandemic just might be flaring some of these up even more. Okay, so we just have to be gentle with ourselves, acknowledge it, and then really pay attention to how we want to hold on to that, or how we may want to let it go. Okay, and that's really what today is all about. Okay, so these emotions, I'll get to that later. Okay, so when we hold on to our trauma, when we hold on to that, these might be some of the emotions that we hold on to, okay? And when we hold on to these, then it makes it more challenging to feel some of these emotions. And when we let go of some of that stuff that doesn't serve us in a good way, when we let go of that, then we can make room for these types of emotions. So we have gratitude as an example, peace, kindness, joy, love, and compassion. So when we let go of some of that stuff that we hold on to, then we make more room for this kind of stuff, okay? And it's kind of like, hey, could you grab me some water? I forgot. Jillene is just walking by. She won't come on camera. But I do want to give a shout out to Jillene. She has been our producer on all of these shows. We've all had to change our roles as we're doing things. And so we call her the Wizard of Oz. She's the person in the background making all this stuff happen. So she's been doing an amazing job. So thank you, Jillene. And now she's getting me some water because I forgot to get some. But anyway, so back to these emotions. I always ask people when I do trainings, like, raise your hand if you enjoy, thank you. I always ask people, raise your hand if you enjoy being around grouchy people. So let me ask you that. So raise your hand if you like being around grouchy people. And in all the years that I've done this, most people, there's been like 5 people that raise their hands. But when we look at these emotions, we can think about like, maybe the last time you went to a staff meeting, or maybe even a family gathering, or even a gathering with your friends or something like that. And you left that meeting, or you left that gathering, and you were just feeling yucky, right? Because of all the stuff that was happening. Maybe people were arguing, or, trying to resolve conflict in a very unhealthy way, or whatever. You may have felt like some of this stuff, right? And it didn't feel good. And sometimes we can't quite put our finger or like articulate how that made us feel. Well, what's happening is like we're feeling that energy. All of these words like have energy to it. And when we hold them inside of us, like that's the energy that we're giving off. Okay, and we might say things like, oh man, did you feel the vibes in there? Like, man, the vibes, gosh, they weren't very good. So vibes is just a short word for vibrations, right? And vibration is how we measure energy. So we can literally feel this. We can feel these things, right? The same way we can feel these kinds of words, right? So you may have think about a meeting, again, a family gathering, you know, a one-on-one with a friend or whatever, where you left and you felt like so energized you could levitate, right? Or you just felt so happy and joyful, because you felt these things. Okay, so these have a vibration as well, right? And it's actually a higher vibration than the other page that I just talked about. So when we let go of things that we hold on to that don't serve us in a good way, when we let go of that, then we can make more room for this kind of stuff. Okay, does that make sense? All right. So I always say this over and over. Where there has been trauma, healing is the answer. Where there has been trauma, healing is the answer. And letting go is one of the ways that we can heal. Okay, there's many, many, many ways to heal. And letting go of some of those emotions that we hold on to is one of the ways that we can heal. So I just I just saw the blanket that I'm sitting in front of. I forgot to mention that in the beginning, but I want to give a shout out to Bethany Yellowtail. So many, many years ago, she took a healthy risk. She went to school to live her dream because she wanted to be her best self. And her dream was starting her company called Be Yellowtail. So it's a fashion design business. And this is one of her blankets back here. Isn't that beautiful? So it's just hanging in my home. And anyway, I just wanted to give Bethany a shout out. You can still find her stuff on Be Yellowtail. Anyway, so where there has been trauma, healing is the answer. So the Native Wellness Institute, this is why we exist. So we exist because of all this stuff happened and continues to happen, the historical, through contemporary trauma, and then how that plays out through intergenerational trauma that's depicted here. This is why we exist as an organization. And more importantly, we exist to help our people move forward from that. Okay, so where there has been trauma, healing is the answer. So all of the work that we do, we try to keep the teachings of our ancestors alive because we believe that all of the answers that we need to help ourselves let go, to help ourselves move through this, is found in our culture. Like our ancestors left a roadmap, many roadmaps for us to follow. So our goal then at the Native Wellness Institute is to keep the teachings of our ancestors alive, and we do that through training and technical assistance to tribal and urban communities. So that's what we do, and we do that through a series of curriculums that we have developed, or training opportunities that we design specifically for a community. And so again, that's part of why we're doing these Native Wellness Power Hours, because we're not able to go into communities right now, and in the future, who knows what that might look like as well. So we're coming to you in your homes now through technology, and still getting these important messages out to you. So this is why I love to talk about trauma, because we have to talk about healing. So trauma then, poverty is trauma. Okay, watching or experiencing firsthand violence is trauma. Losing a loved one, or losing a pet, or losing a job, or losing a friendship are examples of trauma. So we can think about all these different ways that we can experience trauma. Of course, and there's other ways, right? There's tons of other examples of trauma. And because of trauma in our past, so whether from our parents, our grandparents, great-grandparents, etc., one of the lasting impacts of trauma are these 3 unspoken rules. And these rules are: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. So some of our previous Power Hour speakers have talked about that. So these three unspoken rules: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. In my experience and in my opinion, those three unspoken rules are what keep our people from healing. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Because we talk about, well, what do you need to do to heal, right? Talk, trust, and feel. So we need to start breaking through those and making it okay. And I always have my ears on to listen for that word heal. So even in the last 5 years, I hear that word way more than I did before that. And so many of us doing this work, my mentors and role models that did this work before me, and their mentors and role models that did the work before them, like, we rarely heard the word heal, and then now we hear it a lot. So that tells me that people are talking about it, and that's a good thing, and we need to talk about it more. So when we talk about heal, we're simply talking about um, to feel better, to feel better. Okay, so when we look at the word heal, I've learned that it's a Hebrew, in the English language, it's a Hebrew derived word that means to become whole, to become whole. And we know that from an indigenous or from a native or a tribal perspective, that means to become whole physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So when we talk about healing, then what are we going to do for our physical self, our mental self, our emotional self, and our spiritual self to heal? Okay. And then sometimes we have to figure out, well, what is it that I need to heal from? Like, what does that mean? Okay. And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit deeper now. So sometimes, because of those unspoken rules, don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, sometimes people will like make fun of healing, or and I know that that's just their coping mechanism because they don't want to talk about their feelings. um, People may make fun, like sometimes when we come into communities, and you can always tell the people that don't want to be there, they're forced or mandated to be there, whatever, and they'll say things like, "Oh, what are we gonna do? Stand in a circle and hold hands and sing Kumbaya?" Like, those are exact words that I've heard numerous times. Or they'll say things like, "Oh, here comes those touchy feely people. They're gonna make us cry." So like, crying is like one way we can heal, right? Crying is a release. Crying is actually an awesome release. Um, I cried the other day. I think last week on Monday, or I just had a struggling moment, and I just cried. I had this little release, and then I felt better, and then I moved on. So crying actually is a really good release. And I have a friend that looks at crying as a ceremony. Like, so it's this really personal and just sacred time. So I always think about that too. I think that's awesome. Crying as a ceremony. And just like I have friends that look at laughter as ceremony, I think that's how I look at it too. So I love to laugh. And that's one of my releases too, is through laughter, because I love to laugh. So again, breaking through those unspoken rules of don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And those rules and understandings and information really came out a lot of the work around the adult children of alcoholics movement. Adult children of alcoholics. So what that means is, if you grew up with parents who were alcoholic and now you're an adult child of an alcoholic. Okay. And because we know how our generations impact us well, right? Because our parents raise us, and then they learn to parent from their parents, and they learn to parent from their parents, right? So we know that it's all connected. Okay. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit here. So in the in the in the big picture of things, the more we can learn about trauma, the better we can understand ourselves. We can better understand our siblings, our parents, our grandparents, our coworkers, our friends, our neighbors, like everyone. The more we understand trauma, the more we can better understand everyone. And there's a term that people use called being trauma and healing informed. Well, we add the healing informed, but being trauma informed, that's part of it. Is like really understanding trauma. And one of the reasons why I like to really understand trauma is because we disempower the trauma and we empower ourselves. So I said that at the very beginning, that sometimes our trauma holds us hostage and it keeps us stuck. And it's like we have this big cloud over us all the time, and that's our trauma, right? And it holds us down, and it keeps us feeling heavy, and it keeps us stuck from moving forward. And sometimes it impacts all kinds of things, like feeling worthy. And sometimes we don't even feel worthy of feeling good, right? So working on that is part of our healing too. Okay, so sometimes then people may say, well, I don't, what do I need to heal from? So there's a tool based on some research that we use. So I talked about the Adult Children of Alcoholics movement, and there was a couple of women, Jane Middleton Moss and Lori Dwinell, that did lots of work in this field. And what they did was they helped us to identify trauma and then how it impacts behavior. So they have all kinds of books and even new editions of books to help us understand all of those concepts, to help us understand how family systems operate when there's alcohol or violence or other trauma in the home. Okay, like in reading those books, it's really helpful, but to see things clearly. And what that also does is help us to have an understanding of our own lives and the people that we work with, etc., etc. The other thing that it does, when we understand trauma, it helps us to like look at people and instead of judging them, like, geez, what's wrong with you? Like, how come you're acting that way? It helps us to view them, their behavior as, oh, I wonder what happened to you. You'll see that difference? The judging way of like, geez, what's wrong with you? Versus, oh, what happened to you? Like, what happened to you that makes you behave in that way? And also, when we have that understanding, then we don't take other people's behavior personal. That's that's a really challenging one for a lot of us, right? Is to not take other people's behavior personal. But when we learn about all this stuff, we learn like not to do that. So the more we learn about trauma, the better. That's why I love learning about trauma. I love reading about it and hearing different perspectives. But I also love learning about healing and hearing people's stories on that. So Jane Middleton Moss and Lori Donnell, you can Google their names, and you can Google Adult Children of Alcoholics, and different books and resources and stuff will come up. And I really encourage you to read on that. So from their work, we designed a handout that we call the Trauma Web. The Trauma Web. So on your screen here shortly, you'll see the copy of the Trauma Web. So I'm going to put this on our Facebook page here when I'm done with this, and I'll put it on a JPEG, and if you want to print it out, you can. But for now, we're going to leave it up on the screen just so you can take a look at it. My like vision and yeah, my vision is to have like every tribal person, every First Nation person, every Indigenous person around the world to like look at this trauma web and fill it out. And so here we are in a pandemic, and I think this is an awesome time to do it. So on this handout, you will see on the left-hand side, and hopefully it's on the left-hand side as you're looking at it. Oh yeah, it would be. So on the left-hand side, you'll see examples of trauma, okay? And these are only as many examples that would fit on this page. We could literally have a whole flip chart full of examples of trauma, right? So the left-hand column are examples of trauma. And so how you fill this out, you can kind of like mentally fill this out as you're looking at it. But on the left-hand side, you think about your life experience from birth until now. You think about your parents' life experience. And then you also think about your grandparents' life experience or those that raised you. So it could have been an auntie or uncle or somebody that raised you. So if you or them experienced any of those examples of trauma on the left-hand side, you would draw a line from that example of trauma to you in the middle. Okay? So again, maybe you've never been to war or had a war experience, but maybe your mom or dad or your grandpa or grandma did. And if that was the case, you would draw a line from war experiences to you in the middle. Okay? So this is 3 generations that you're looking at. Maybe you didn't go to boarding school, but your parents or grandparents did. Maybe you don't experience alcoholism, but maybe your parents or grandparents did. So you go through the whole list on the left-hand side: death of a loved one, gambling addiction, emotional abuse, drug addiction, physical abuse, verbal abuse, cultural loss, alcoholism, neglect, racism, divorce, poverty, violence, disability, relocation, foster care, adoption, oppression, sexual abuse, loss of a job, boarding school, war experiences, loss of spirituality, discrimination of any kind. Those are the examples of the trauma on the trauma web. I just read them all. So if you don't have, if you're not doing this let me see. Raise your hand, raise your finger, wiggle your toe, whatever, if you or your parents or grandparents experienced any of those on the left-hand column. I'm going to read through that list again. Death of a loved one, gambling addiction, emotional abuse, drug addiction, physical abuse, verbal abuse, cultural loss, alcoholism, neglect, racism, divorce, poverty, violence, disability, relocation, foster care, adoption, oppression, sexual abuse, loss of a job, boarding school, war experiences, loss of spirituality, discrimination of any kind. Whew. Okay, so just take a deep breath. Deep breath in. Release. Another deep breath in. Release. Okay, those are a lot. And when we do this in communities, like the most common response is people will say, holy crap, like I just marked every single one. Or people will say, oh my God, I'm messed up. Or people will say, oh my gosh, now I totally better understand my parents. Okay, those are some common responses. So what we're doing right now, like here virtually, is we're doing collective healing. Because before we can heal, we have to figure out what it is that we need to heal from. So on the right-hand column, now this is all about you. Okay, the right-hand column of the trauma web, this is all about you. So I'm going to read through this list. These are the behaviors that linger because of trauma. Okay, so you can think about if you relate to any of these, and raise your hand or wiggle your toes or whatever. Frequent periods of depression, difficulty hearing positives, fear of conflict and anger, continuing sense of guilt, need to be in control, fear of dependency, overly responsible, very irresponsible, overachievement, poor self-image, need to be right, fear of trusting, perfectionist, a chaos junkie, fear of feeling, fear of intimacy, underachievement, denial of problems, fear of incompetence, compulsive behavior, heavily depends on others, repetitive relationship behaviors, unable to relax, let go, and have fun, hypersensitive to the needs of others. So how you would fill this out, if you can identify with any of those behaviors, you would draw a line from those behaviors to you in the middle. And sometimes how people have used this is they'll color code it. And on the left-hand side, they'll make their life experience one color, their parents a different color, their grandparents a different color. And sometimes they've all experienced the same thing. Again, that's intergenerational trauma. Or sometimes they have only experienced something. In the right-hand column, they'll use two colors, like the old Jillene and the new Jillene, right? Just to look at how far that they have grown. Okay, so now I don't even know if I'm still on the screen or not, but I'm gonna turn my little flip chart here, because I didn't have time to do my trauma web and put it up there. But I kind of drew an example of a trauma web here. This isn't to scale, but so typically this is what somebody's trauma web will look like, right? So we have all these lines on the left-hand side, and we have all these lines on the right-hand side. And the reason this is called a trauma web is because most of our trauma webs will look like this, okay? And the reason we have all these lines on here is because of this, okay? The initial historical trauma, and then the lasting intergenerational trauma, okay? So this explains why we have all these lines here, okay? Does that make sense? So what we're trying to do here is like really connect the dots to help people understand trauma and our current day behaviors today. Because still, many of our people, certainly they've heard about boarding schools, they've heard about genocide, they've heard about all these things, right? And so when we come along to talk about historical or intergenerational trauma again, people will say, oh my God, you're still talking about that? Like, just get over it already. Like, when are you going to stop talking about that? And so I agree, like, we do need to get over it, but it's what is the it? Get over it. What is the it that we have to get over? So that's what we're doing here. We're trying to like dissect this all out to help us understand what the it is. And the it is the lasting behaviors of trauma. That when they go unhealed, then we're going to pass them on to the next generation. And then the next generation, and then the next generation. And then all these generations down the road, our people are still going to be suffering from all the things that we see in our communities today, right? That keep our people down. Now, thankfully, so many of our people have done their healing work, and awesome and amazing things are being passed down as well, right? Our language, our songs, our value systems, right? Those are the historical wisdom that's being passed down as well. So we always have to be mindful of that. So here's what I have done to my trauma web. Dun, 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 dun. So this is a butterfly. One time somebody said, oh, is that a moth? This is a butterfly. So we can think about springtime, and our butterflies will be coming up here shortly. But butterflies represent change and transformation. Our butterflies represent renewal. And so when we put this on top of trauma, then what this tells us is that we can transcend our trauma. We can transcend our trauma. We don't have to wear our trauma as a badge of honor, okay? We don't have to get into the trauma Olympics, right? My trauma is worse than your trauma. We don't have to talk about our trauma every day, 10 times a day. So when we do that, it's like sometimes our own trauma keeps us in our trauma, right? So for an example, one of the things on the right hand side, what this research on trauma showed us is that people that experience trauma display 21 behavioral characteristics. And all of those things that I read on the right hand side, the frequent periods of depression, difficulty hearing positives, need to be in control, need to be right, chaos junkie, all that kind of stuff, Those are the 21 behavioral characteristics. So when we experience trauma, these are the lasting behaviors. Okay, again, so we're trying to connect those dots, trauma to the lasting behavior. So the need for chaos, and sometimes people might say a drama queen or a drama king, that's a lasting impact of trauma. So actually, this pandemic is feeding a lot of people's need for chaos, this pandemic. And we might be watching the news 23 and a half hours a day, and we might just be getting all into it and all of this because it's feeding our need for chaos. Does that make sense? And so that's why our self-care suggestions are like, walk away from the news. Walk away from the news. Certainly we can, read an article or two or watch the TV for a little bit to get an update, but like walk away from the news for our own self-care. Or we can think about other decisions that we make in our life that bring chaos to ourselves. Okay? Whether it's the type of relationships that we choose to be in, whether it's a friendship or a more intimate relationship. Okay, are we making these decisions and choosing the kind of people because it's going to bring chaos to our life because we're a chaos junkie? See, does that make sense? So these are the ways that chaos continues to play out. Or the need to be in control. Like right now, this pandemic is just like throwing all of that like upside down, right? Because we don't have any control about what's going to happen in the future, and so it might help that fear and anxiety to like seep in because we don't have any control. Or we might be trying to compensate and bring more control into our lives. Okay, so these are just some ways that we can think about how trauma continues to play out in our own lives. And sometimes it's ways that we don't even think of, right? The need to be right. Usually the people that need to be right have to prove someone else wrong. And they'll do that in a number of ways. And so sometimes we're blinded by our own behaviors. Okay, sometimes I'm blinded by my own behaviors too, and either somebody will bring it to my attention, or I'll just sit and like do some deep thinking about something, like, oh, what was my behavior like that didn't quite feel right for me, and I do some deep thinking around that, right? So we can look at other ways that trauma may play out in our lives. Okay, so these are the things then that we can work to heal from. Okay, so again, healing, heal in the English language, is a Hebrew derived word that means to become whole. And we know that means to become whole physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I would challenge you to take a look at the word heal in your language. Like, how do you say it in your language, and what does it translate to? What does it mean? And when I go around to tribal communities and I ask people that, and most often in tribal languages, the word means something like to feel good. To feel good. So when we look at it in that perspective, it's like we're supposed to feel good, like we're supposed to feel good, and it's okay. It's okay to feel good. All right. Okay. So this tool, this trauma web, is a tool, right? It's a tool for our well-being, and we're going to have it on our Facebook page, and we'll put it on our homepage of our what's it called? God, anyway, we'll put it on our Facebook page, and the other thing that I can't. What? Oh yeah, our website. Sorry, I forgot what that word was. Anyway, we'll put it on those, so they're a tool for our own healing. So let's take advantage of this quarantine, right? Let's take advantage of this quarantine. It's here for a reason. It's here to teach us all kinds of things. And are we worried about the chaos of everything, or are we just gonna chill for a little bit and like just do some deep thinking on that? My thinking is that's an opportunity for all of us to like become better people while we're in this quarantine. So when we go out and about later, we're going to be like these amazing human beings that are going to cultivate and nurture and help sustain other amazing human beings. Like that's the power of healing and what healing does. So I encourage you and I challenge you, print off this trauma web or do it mentally in your mind. Draw these lines. We don't have to beat ourselves up because we just ran out of ink filling this out, right? Because we had so many lines. We don't need to beat ourselves up, but we can just provide more love and compassion and care for our own selves and for our parents and for our grandparents, right? And then for our future generations as well. Okay, so this is a tool. The next tool that we're going to show, we're going to put up, this is called a healing plan. A healing plan. So we developed this again as a tool to help us like literally write things down. Write things down that will help our own healing. And we can write on this particular handout, there's like a month worth of things that we can do to help our physical well-being, our spiritual well-being, our mental well-being, and our emotional well-being. Okay, so we all heal in different ways, right? 16-year-old is gonna heal differently than a 66-year-old. Okay, different genders are gonna heal in different ways. What resonates with one person may not resonate with another person. Okay, so you're gonna find something that resonates with you, and you might try 3 things, right? And none of them worked for you, and you might just say, screw healing. This is dumb. And many people do that, right? Or you might keep trying new things. Okay, that's going to resonate with you and help you. And I encourage you and challenge you to do that. So at the last one, the Power of Letting Go Part 1, you can go back and watch it. I encourage you, because we gave some letting go tools there, and we talked about getting a piece of paper and writing a word down or a sentence or a paragraph of something that you wanted to let go of, and then we folded it up into tiny pieces, and then we thanked that whatever it was that we were letting go, we thanked it, and then we put it inside of a big cast iron pot, and then we burned it up. Okay, as a way to symbolically, like literally let it go by burning it up. And then we gave another example of getting a rock and talking to the rock inside your head, having a conversation with the rock, and giving that rock whatever it is that you're ready to let go of, and thanking it, because whatever you're letting go of, it did something for you, right? That's why you held on to it for so long. So thanking it for whatever it did for you, and then letting it go by throwing it, not at someone or through a window, but just by throwing it. And then when we get better at letting go, we can still like physically do that, physically let go of writing it or giving it to a rock or whatever. And then soon we can just like visualize it inside of our heads, and we can visualize letting go. We can close our eyes and imagine some wind coming, and on that flow of wind, you're going to give whatever, you're going to let it blow away. Or we can visualize the leaf in a river, and on that leaf, we're going to put whatever it is that we're ready to let go of, and we're going to watch that leaf float down the river, go down a waterfall, and float away. However you want to visualize that, right? Like, this is how powerful our minds are. This is how powerful we are. But sometimes our trauma like clogs all of that up. And our trauma clogs up us believing like how powerful and amazing we are as human beings. Our trauma clogs that up. So healing then like helps to unclog that. Healing helps to like take that dark cloud and like blow it away. That's what healing does for us. Okay. So the other thing, because we're human, when we let go of things, whether it's burning it up or writing a letter and actually sending it to someone, or however we want to visualize letting go, because we're human, what often happens is we let go of something and then we bring it right back. We bring it right back. And we do that with our mind, because that's how powerful we are, right? we bring it right back with our thoughts. And we might start talking about it again or repeating the same story for the 1001th time or whatever, okay? So all that means is we have to let go again, okay? So we might go through the same thing again. Get that rock back out, get that piece of paper back out, get that leaf back out, whatever, visualize, whatever. And we have to let go again. And then if we bring it back again, well, then all that means is we have to let it go again. And pretty soon, we're going to let go, let go, let go, let go. We're going to become really good at letting go. So then the next time something happens, right, then we're going to let go like that. And we might not hold on to something for so long. Some of us are carrying around stuff for decades, right? We've been holding on to all of this stuff for decades, whether it's anger or rage or resentment or grief or hurt or pain or shame, all of that. Some of us have been holding on to that for decades, right? And we may be very comfortable because that's all we know, right? It's doing something for us. So we can practice letting go. Just like when we want to practice being a better singer. When we want to be a better singer, we're going to practice. When we want to be a better free throw shooter, we're going to practice. When we want to be a better painter, a better beater, a better weaver, a better cook, we're going to practice, right? So we can practice letting go as well. Practice, 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 practice letting go. And again, if you don't want to do the paper thing and burn it, you think that's dumb. If you don't want to throw a rock, you think that's dumb. Well, fine. Like do something else that helps you to let go. Find something that you resonate with that helps you to let that go. All right. So when we let go of whatever it is that we want to let go of, then we have to do something that's going to fill that space up. Okay. Does that make sense? When we let go of all that stuff, we have to do something to fill that up with. And in part, that's what this healing plan helps us to do. It helps us to let go. And then what are we going to do to fill ourselves back up? So we're going to put this healing plan on our website, nativewellness.com. I'm also going to put it on our Facebook page at Native Wellness Institute. It's probably where you are now. And you can print these off, or you can maybe take a picture of it on your phone, or we can email it to you, or you could draw it out on your own piece of paper. And I challenge you, encourage you to fill these in. What are you going to do for yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to work on your own healing? What are you going to do this week? What are you going to do next week, the week after that, and the week after that? Like, take this time of being at home, take this time of being quarantined. Like, this is one of the blessings, how I see it, of this pandemic, is that we have time, right? And what better use of our time than to like really work on our own selves? Because when we work on our own selves, we strengthen our relationships with our families, with our communities, with our friends, everyone. So let's take the blessings of this pandemic and do something for ourselves. So your healing plan is something that's going to help you break some of these cycles. Okay. So the other thing is like what trauma does is it keeps us stuck in the trauma. And so sometimes that's all we want to talk about is our trauma. Okay. So, and that's okay, because sometimes that's how we need to release and express, right? But we also, and if that's the case, we also need to talk about the good things, right? So what are the good things? So just like in this pandemic, we look at the people who are getting infected and the people who are passing away. We send our condolences and the blessings to the families who have lost loved ones. And probably all of us, we're getting to know more and more people that have passed away, right? And then there's always the flip side. We can also look at the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands actually around our globe, who have healed from this virus. Okay, so that's the flip side. There's always that flip side to everything. So the last thing that I want to share when we talk about healing is what I have learned in the last 35 years in doing this work is there's three things that I take a look at when we talk about healing. And the first one is, do I want to be healed? Do I want healing for myself? Okay, so the want. And then you might think, well, of course, like who doesn't? But when we think about the benefits, but that's in quotations, because we hold on to things because we're getting something from it. So sometimes we may not want to heal, right? So we could take, do I want to heal? And then the second question is, do I feel worthy of healing? So because of trauma, and especially because of childhood trauma, many of us like don't feel worthy, okay, for all kinds of reasons, okay? So we have to take a look at that. Do I feel worthy of healing? And a good example of that is like, I think about the losses that I have had in my life. And this one time I had this significant loss. And if I laughed, I felt bad. Because it's like, because I'm sad right now. If I laughed, I felt bad. Like I wasn't worthy of laughing. So that was just a part of my grief, right? So I had to move through that grief in order to say, like, yes, it's okay to laugh. Even if I am in the middle of grieving, it's okay to laugh. Okay, so do we feel worthy? Do I want to be healed? Do I feel worthy of healing? And the last one that I have learned is that, do I believe that I can be healed? Do I believe that I can be healed? So we can just kind of contemplate and do some deep thinking around those questions, right? As we move through our own healing journeys. And there might be some things that we need to let go of to even look at those questions. Do I want healing for myself? Do I want healing for my family? Do I want healing for my people? Do I feel worthy of healing? Do my children feel worthy of healing? Does my community feel worthy of healing? Do I believe I can be healed? Do I believe my family can be healed? Do I believe my people can be healed? Okay. Now, once we start our healing journeys, guess what happens? We become examples for others. We help others believe that they can do it because they see us doing it. That's a traditional value that goes across the globe that I have learned and seen and experienced. Okay, so when we do our healing, we help others believe that they can heal too. When we do our own healing work, we want to become the cheerleaders for others and let other people know that they can do it as well. Like that's how awesome healing is. Okay. So here we are. An hour's already passed already. This was part 2, and I may do a part 3. I'm not sure yet what my next one will be. But I want to thank you for tuning in today. The last time I shared about, I watched this show that my friends kept talking about, Marie Kondo. She's like the Japanese organizer lady, and she would say, "Does this bring me joy? And if it doesn't bring you joy, then you get rid of it." That's kind of how I look at all this trauma stuff. It's like, does all this stuff, like, does this bring you joy? Do these words bring you joy? And if not, then let them go. Let them go so you can embrace this. Like, I believe in you. I know that you're worthy, and I know that healing can happen to you. Healing is the greatest act of decolonization. Healing is the greatest act of self-love. Healing is the greatest act of self-preservation. So thank you for tuning in today. This was the Native Wellness Power Hour. We're in our week 5. We come to you 7 days a week, 1 hour a day at 9 a.m. Hawaii time, 11 a.m. Alaska time, 12 noon Pacific, 1 Mountain Time, 2 Central, 3 Eastern, and it's tomorrow and the other places where people tune in and watch from. We thank you. We thank our partners, NICWA and the Noise Foundation. And I wish you well on your healing journey. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.